from DFR who's leading this RAC. And thank you for starting the recording, Karen. I have with me a few colleagues today. Karen Winkle, our rules coordinator, who is graciously doing all of the screen sharing and technical details. Would anyone else from DFR like to introduce themselves before we get going and see which RAC members we have with us today?
Hi, Lily. I just wanted to go ahead and introduce myself for those that may not know me. My name is Sophia Para, and I am the Drug Price Transparency Program Coordinator.
Thanks, Sophie. Appreciate that. If there's no one else from DFR who wants to say hello, which is fine, let's go ahead and just make sure we see which RAC members are here. I'm just going to go down my alphabetical list, and if you could come off camera and just say hello so we can put a face to a name and make sure everybody's sound is working, that would be great. Beth Ann, are you on? I think she is not actually.
I'm here instead of Beth Ann. My name is Jessica. I work at Strategies with Beth Ann.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jessica. Another good reason to do introductions, in case there are people filling in. All right. Next I have Brett. Brett, I think I saw you on.
Yep, there we go. I am here.
Wonderful. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And Charlie.
Hi, Charlie Fisher with Osberg.
Nice to have you with us today. And Daria.
Hey, Daria McGrew Pharma. Thanks.
Thank you. And like I mentioned earlier, Eric Chung was not able to join this meeting, but he let me know that. Gregory, I think I saw you on too.
Yes, hi, Gregory Halen with Endo.
Wonderful. Thanks, Gregory. And Lynetta.
Hi, Lynetta Moore with Integra Chain. And sorry, my camera is not working.
No problem. Thanks so much, Lynetta. And
Thank you.
Yes. Melody, are you here? Oh, you're on mute, but I can see you.
Oh, hi, I'm Melody Calkins with Bayer.
Wonderful. Thanks, Melody. And Robert.
I am here, Robert Judge with Moda Health, but I'll be leaving midway through this because I have another appointment I need to pick.
Okay, great. Thanks, Robert. Okay, well, let's get to it. Karen, do you mind putting up yeah, you can scroll down there and I'll go over our agenda. First, we're going to discuss comments and comments that we received both during the last RAC meeting and written comments, which we really appreciated, those of you who were able to submit written comments. I have summarized them and also summarized our either response or additional questions. And so that will take up I think a good portion of our time today. And then next we will go over the next section of draft rules. And we have some specific questions for you all, and I imagine that you have some questions for us too. Finally, we will end with public comment and then talk about next steps for our third RAC meeting. Any questions or concerns about the agenda before we get moving on it? Okay. And I should say, feel free to put comments in the chat or just come off mute. Sometimes I have a hard time monitoring the chat, so don't hesitate to interrupt if you need to get a thought across. I will not be intentionally ignoring anybody. Okay, Karen, do you mind putting up the slides? Thank you. And I think we can go to slide number 3. Perfect. Thank you. So this is my attempt at, there are, I think, 2 slides in this overview category, just the themes from our first meeting and potential next steps. And you will probably have noted, if you had a chance to look at the draft revisions to the rules themselves, and more conversation about either understanding the concern or understanding a potential solution. So please don't be concerned that you didn't see very many changes in those rules. We just wanted to discuss them more. So the first kind of overview was of comments is around clarifying definitions, and you can see more discussion really needed to discuss the suggestions around new prescription drug, the start marketing date, the definition for reporting manufacturer, as well as dosage. So we'll go over those in depth. And if you go to the next slide, Karen. Great. This is, a bit more of the kind of mishmash, not just definitions, but really talking about good faith effort. And the comments we received really wanted to retain this. We think we need to discuss what that would look like a little bit more. We also had a comment around in the changes to the annual drug price increase data reporting, making those voluntary in compliance with our updated bulletin. There was the request to add no penalty language. There was also an opposing request to not add the voluntary language. Right now, we are not proposing a change, but have that open for further discussion. And then there were a few other kind of more minor comments that we don't have listed up here, but really welcome people bringing them up during the conversation. Or if there's anything else that you haven't had a chance to comment on yet. So that's kind of the outline of the comments that we've received and our initial response. If you go to slide 5, I know this slide is going to be a little bit unreadable with this white on blue and the underline, but just wanted to have it up here for easy reference. So we're going to start with the definition around clarifying new prescription drug. And if you go to, so this shows the change, all the new language, all the new substantive language is underlined. And if you go to slide 6, thank you. So the member comments, we had some kind of maybe I don't want to call it misunderstanding, but some potential inconsistencies around what we had written and what we had verbally said. And really our approach to the new changes, our intent is to clarify what current practice is. We also had some comments around supplemental approvals and potentially wanting to remove that language. We want to clarify as a group what we mean by supplemental approval, what you all think that means, and come to a common definition. And then there were 2 other comments that we really needed more information on before, moving forward with any potential changes. One is around the definition of continuously marketed, and the other was a comment around whether authorized generics are being excluded. So I will, I know I ran over those quickly, and I'll try to take them one by one and then pause and leave time for discussion. So really, starting at the top here around our approach on a new NDC being considered a new drug. And Sophie, feel free to jump in here. But again, the intent of our changes is really to clarify current practice, and that a new NDC that replaces an existing NDC with a continuously active WAC does not meet our reporting criteria. Sophie, do you want to say anything else about that? We can pause for RAC members too then.
Yeah, they can mull over thoughts and comments. Yeah, but I guess what we're trying to make sure is clear in the rule, because I get asked the question a lot, is that we have generated a new NDC. Sometimes it has the same FDA application number as a previous NDC. Sometimes it has a different application number than a related NDC for the same, basically type of drug, overall drug product. And in those cases, we are letting people know that it's a new NDC. It requires a new drug report if it meets the reporting thresholds. And then we also get questions about, well, we've just bought this from so-and-so because drugs do seem to be traded like candy, is my often example, as frequently as it happens. And we bought this from so-and-so, and we're going to renumber it and relabel it under our name. Does that require a new drug report? And I tell them no. So we're trying to clarify these situations. But of course, sometimes there are some odd situations like we've bought a drug from so-and-so, but they never put it on the market. Well, guess what? You're first entering it on the market, it's a new drug. I don't care if somebody else, owned it or whatnot. It was never on the market. So those are the kinds of things that we're trying to clarify with the changes to this definition.
Thanks so much, Sophie. So I'd like to open it up to RAC members to hear your thoughts on our kind of explanation and whether or not our explanation is kind of jiving with what we have written and recommendations or thoughts you might have. Yeah, Lynetta, go ahead.
So it makes perfect sense what Sophia is saying about products that are on the market and they may be, divested or acquired or whatever. But there is one other situation that we do see kind of frequently. A manufacturer may have commercialized a product, brought it to the market, then they may have pulled it from the market. And then they may divest it to another company or sell it to another company. There's a period of time that it will be out of the market completely. So when the new company comes in, so that's kind of when I read continuously marketed, because there is a gap sometimes, and that we've seen, I personally I've seen it several times that happens, where the old company will, basically pull it from the market, and then there is another company that will then start to market it, and there may be a gap of, it could be 6 months, it could be a year, it could be several years. So would the new company that has taken on the product, would they need to submit new drug reporting?
Yeah, I might have to talk to some people to get some information on that. And if we decided that those are the same situation, we might be able to change out the wording a little bit and do previously marketed instead of continuously, or something else to clarify those types of situations if they're the same.
Yeah, that's kind of similar. I really appreciate you bringing up this other circumstance that we didn't mention and, is not reflected in the current rules necessarily. And I think, like Sophie says, we'll need to take that back to discuss it and, potentially, ask some of you all for kind of more examples of that, just so we have a clear picture of it before we adapt the draft rules accordingly.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Lynetta. Yeah, appreciate you bringing that up. Other folks who want to comment on this? Yeah, Daria.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's just still not quite clear to me. It seems inconsistent because you do have what a new drug is not, a new NDC created if continuously marketed. But then you also are including supplemental applications. And when we discussed it last month, the discussion that I remember was, the intent was, if you file an SNDA, which is it's a specific thing by the FDA, that an SNDA that creates a new NDC would be a new drug, right? But those can sometimes be the same thing. So an SNDA is sometimes a repackaging of a drug that has been continuously marketed that creates a new NDC. So I think that there's an contradiction there that is still confusing for us.
And I have to confess, I don't know what a supplemental approval is. It's just a term I've heard. My thought is that if it is a new NDC, whether under the same approval number or a different approval number, then it's a new drug, unless it's a replacement of a previous NDC.
So maybe then that is what's missing, because the language as written says that is not a new drug, right? Like, maybe what's missing is if it is replacing a new NDC or something, and I don't have the answer, but like those two things are
Okay.
completely contradictory statements then. Because, and to your point, sorry, Sophia.
Go ahead.
To your
Yeah.
point, an SNDA, little s, big NDA, is a specific thing with the FDA. It's
Okay.
not.
So we should
it
probably
has a
avoid
specific
using it.
definition. It's a specific thing. So yes, we need to be clear. Maybe there needs to be more clarity in what you mean by supplemental approval, because an little s, big NDA is a specific thing.
Thanks, Daria.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead, Lynetta.
and that's kind of where I was going with it as well. For a supplemental NDA to be, whether it's a supplemental to an NDA, a BLA, an ANDA, or a BLA under a 351A or a 351K, they're all going to have that little S, like Daria is saying. And supplemental can be for a multitude of things. It could be where a manufacturer just changes a manufacturing location, or it could be for something as simple as we're validating a new API vendor. So there could be a lot of different things. So I'm wondering, and just kind of a question for everyone to kind of think about, when you talk about a supplemental filing, when a supplemental filing issues for that manufacturer, there's a new NDC and a new WAC. It could be for a specific packaging configuration. It could be for a new strength. It could even be for a new indication. Are those the types of things that the state is looking for new drug reporting?
Sophie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the answer is yes.
I think so.
Correct.
Yeah.
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 Mhm.
So
what's your recommended language for that? Because it seems clear from what everybody is saying that we weren't using supplemental approval in the way we necessarily intended.
Yeah. So if it's a supplemental approval, and I would look at saying something along the lines where it does that, and the product is issued a new NDC and a new WAC, then that's when you're requesting a new drug reporting. That's, so that's kind of what, that's kind of the way I'm seeing it with other states as well as, out there. This is kind of how we look at it, coming from a regulatory background. This is kind of how we look at it from the perspective of a filing. If it issues a new NDC or a new WAC, a new NDC and a new WAC, because they go hand in hand, it's either for a new strength, packaging configuration, a new indication, is something of that nature, then I would, my assumption here is that it's going to trigger new drug reporting, of course, if it meets the criteria, right?
Right.
So where it gets a little complicated is because an authorized generic is also a supplemental NDA. And all of these are to the initial filing, which would have a single application.
Yeah, and we would certainly not be excluding authorized generics. They are certainly included if they meet the pricing threshold.
Lynetta, did your sound cut out? We can't hear you if you're talking, and I feel like you had more to say, and we wanted to hear it.
Yeah, the square is lit up like there might be sound that we're not hearing.
Yeah. I will put something in the chat in case she can't hear us. But Lynetta, if you can't hear us, please feel free to rejoin and we can kind of come back to this point.
Yeah, because my main goal with the update of the definition is to reduce the number of repeat questions I get.
Yeah.
To clarify.
Okay, looks like maybe Lynetta is gonna rejoin. While we're waiting for her, yeah, Melody, great.
So then could you clarify, so like with a label expansion, even if there is no new NDC, then would a new report be required?
We're NDC based system.
Okay, so then, yeah, we would echo some of the comments that were raised, because with the supplemental approval language, that would essentially infer that a label expansion would be considered a supplemental approval and therefore would need a new
Yeah.
drug report in the current
The
language.
reporting is based on NDCs, so
Mhm.
yeah, we'll have to work to get some wording to make sure
Thank you.
clarify that.
So Melody, and I mean, probably everybody knows I'm the newest to the prescription drug world. So Melody, so not every label expansion has a new NDC. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And how else would a label expansion be identified?
Well, I would have to go back to some of our operations folks to flesh out the details. But basically the feedback that I received was just that those two elements, having the supplemental and also having the having the new creating the new sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Oh, that's okay. Daria, did you
sorry,
want?
but having the
Daria
label
came off
expansion.
camera. Maybe she wanted to add
Yeah.
something on this point.
I just wanted to add, it is confusing, and from what I was told, I mean, I think what a lot of folks want is you would want a new report if there's a new indication, but NDCs and indications are not always directly connected. You can have one drug with 8 indications and yet it only has one NDC, and then you can have a drug with one indication that has 20 NDCs, because the NDC is a function of packaging and labeler more than it is a function of the drug or the like chemical product. So yeah, just I'm in it and I get it. Like, you guys are NDC based. I understand we need to figure out how to do that, but those two things are not always aligned. And so I think it, like, a new indication approval by the FDA is not always going to be the same as a new NDC, and sometimes they're completely disconnected.
Sophie, were you going to add something to that, or?
No, it just sounds like there's a lot of things that we're basically focused on. Somebody's contacting us and saying, well, we've got these new products. Do we have to file a new drug report? Because basically they don't want to. And I tell them, yes, it's a new NDC. I need a new drug report. And and sometimes they'll use different words about, oh, but it's just part of the same thing, or it's part of this, it's like, okay, well, we're trying to say whether it happens at the same time as the initial product or at a later date, a new drug report is required regardless. So if you have a new NDC. And so we'll try to see if we can clarify that.
Yeah, Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, my thinking is evolving on this. The world revolves around NDCs that are 9-digit or 11-digit. I don't know, there's background noise. It's not coming from me, but I don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah,
but,
if everyone could mute themselves while Robert's talking, that'd be great. Thank you. Go ahead, Robert.
So when a prescription's adjudicated at a pharmacy, the prescription rarely has an indication associated with it. So I don't know if that is meaningful in this conversation, but collecting that information from a drug price transparency perspective is not going to be useful in claims data. It might be useful from a manufacturer submission perspective, but I don't know what its applicability would be.
Yeah, we don't track the indications really, so.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. So on this point, I think it would be really helpful for folks, again, to kind of go back to their operations teams or whoever, whatever other teams, and to help us in your written comments and get some more clarity around these kind of inconsistencies in our language, hopefully understanding a little bit more about what we're looking for. And also, just to be clear, I know we have a third meeting. Just because these are things from our first meeting doesn't mean we can't talk about them next time too. So really appreciate your help with that. And if we do have questions kind of as we're, you know, making revisions, we could certainly reach out to, you know, the folks who have submitted specific comments to try to get clarity on that. Any other comments on the supplemental approval? And Lynetta, are you back? Because you were talking about authorized generics.
I am so sorry. I do not know
that's
what
okay.
happened. My computer
Oh.
completely died.
Great
So,
timing. Always when that
It
happens.
is. I'm sure everyone is aware of authorized generics, but you know they'll be under the initial filing, so under an NDA, and they're brought to market a lot of times. There'll be an SNDA filed that will give authorized generic approval to either an existing company or it could potentially be a new company. So new drug reporting, if a product meets the criteria for new drug reporting, I'm assuming that authorized generics would be reportable.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
That is what we are intending. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah. No,
I'm so
thank you.
sorry.
Oh no, not at all. We wanted to hear what you had to say. It was a cliffhanger for us.
Uh-oh. Apologies.
No. Okay. Are there other comments or questions, Sophie, that you think I've missed on this new prescription drug definition?
I don't think
Okay.
so. I think we've covered the stuff that we had questions about, and it sounds like we definitely want to remove the word supplemental because it's a specific thing that we're not necessarily trying to reference, and make sure we're kind of clear on the NDC new NDC issue a little bit.
Great.
If we can just kind of do some more plain language with some help from our attorneys.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay. If you could go to the next slide, we're going to start talking about start marketing date. So this is the new language. And if you go to the next slide, we had a couple different member comments. One was, which we think would be very helpful, is referencing a source for the start marketing date. And the suggestion was the NSDE. And since they're just comments here, I'll take them one by one. In terms of what we're thinking about that, you know, when we have used start marketing date, we've really been using the FDA directory. And that and the suggestion are both labeler reported. So we just wanted to ask if there is a preferred publicly available FDA source for start marketing date. And kind of throw that out there to everyone.
So for most manufacturers, of course, the marketing start date is listed on the SPL so that they can get the labeling and everything approved. And that's going to be with the FDA directory. I apologize, but I'm not familiar with NSDE, so I can't really comment on that. But as it feeds to the downstream system, the FDA directory feeds Daily Med. Daily Med is then used by the pricing compendiums. So that's kind of the process that the most manufacturers take. And I apologize, I'm not familiar with NSDE, so I'll look that up. But that's kind of there can be disparity, and I think it kind of speaks to the next piece of this. When it's first listed for sale in the United States, first available for purchase in the United States, because that's where a manufacturer kind of has a little bit of difficulty from the perspective of they can get approval, but they may not make it available for sale on that approval date. But a lot of them will put on their SPLs, which is listed in the FDA directory, that date of approval. It's not necessarily available for sale, purchase either way. It's not, a product could be, but a lot of times it's not. And so that, I think, is where some of the disparity comes in, and particularly if like there's a delay in manufacturing, there's a delay in API or components or whatever it could be for the production of the product. Or, you know, there could be a multitude of other reasons why. But I think that's where some of the things that are coming in for more complex products, such as if you have a product with limited distribution, it may not be sold in all states. So you have a lot of very complex cell therapies or gene therapies that are going to be very limited in where these products are going to be available for purchase. And some of them may not be available in the state of Oregon when they're launched. So this limited distribution really has an effect on this because they may launch with a treatment center in 2 states, such as Texas and Minnesota. I'm just picking anything here. But they may only launch then. Well, technically, they're not available for sale anywhere but those 2 states.
Mm-hmm.
So do they still then go ahead and report to Oregon, even though they will not have any sales within the state? And they may never have any sales within the state.
Well, there's always the possibility that a product won't be sold in Oregon ever. It is really difficult for us to know, especially if something's sold on the open market, we don't know who will buy it, when, and where. So that's definitely not a circumstance that we would want to try to differentiate between, or trust a manufacturer to differentiate. Like if you, like in the example that you gave, if a company, if that was their only product and they had limited distribution network where it was restrictively only being sold in like a hospital, in a certain region or things like that, they might not even have to register with us because they don't have any products that are available here. So they wouldn't meet the registration requirements. But if they did have other products and they had that, then we would be expecting new drug reports because the product is available and it's very expensive. And even if it is limited distribution, we have no way of knowing or
Right.
verifying that. So
Yeah, because there are companies in both of those situations where their only product is only dispensed in these very highly
then they don't have to register with us.
Yeah,
because they don't meet the registration requirements.
They don't meet the registration requirements, so they wouldn't be. But then for the ones who have potentially, or could potentially launch a different type of product that would be, that's when they're going to need to report. But only for the products that are being sold in the state, or would it be for both the restricted? What's
like
your
I
thoughts
said,
on
we
that?
don't have any way to distinguish.
Okay.
So that's why
Yeah,
we've chosen the wording we have.
Okay.
Yeah, Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this conversation is interesting. It raised a question in my head. I think, Lynetta, the point that you're making is the drug may be dispensed. An LD drug may be dispensed at a specific location that may not be in the state. And I get that, but if the drug's being paid for by a payer within the state, even though it's dispensed in another state, it would still seem to be something that we'd want to collect the data on.
Yeah, so these cell therapies are very, very unique because of the patient populations that they treat. If there is not a qualified, and this is me understanding from our manufacturers what they're looking to do, the patient actually has to travel to the treatment center, and that it is possible that it could be paid for by a plan within the state of Oregon, but they don't hold a distribution license with the State Board of Pharmacy. And if they don't meet the requirements to be registered with the state. Even though it may be a patient from the state of Oregon traveling to a treatment center, they're not dispersing the product. It's not available for sale in the state of Oregon, so they're not going to hold a distribution license in the state.
So when the FDA gives approval for a drug, in this case maybe a cell therapy, I'm not aware of this process, so educate me. But they do it on behalf of all 50 states, right? They're doing it for the U.S. marketplace, not geographically defined marketplaces.
That they do. They give approval for the U.S., but each state has a requirement for the state to allow the product to be distributed within that state. So what a manufacturer will do is they have to apply for a distribution license of some type within that state before the product can be sold within that state. So this particular, in this instance, I'm not talking about a specific manufacturer, but there are manufacturers out there who only apply and get distribution licenses in the states in which they distribute. So in my example, this particular manufacturer would only apply for Texas and Minnesota. Now, because Minnesota is relatively close to Oregon, relatively speaking, because it is a big country out there, I get it. But a patient with this rare malady could travel to Minnesota for treatment and receive treatment, but it would not be in the state of Oregon, and the product would not be dispensed in the state of Oregon, nor would it ever be. And therefore, this particular manufacturer would never hold a distribution license with the State Board of Pharmacy. Therefore, they don't meet the requirement to register with the state for reporting.
I agree. But if they had other products and were required to register with us,
then they would.
Then they would have to be report.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see that distinction that you're making, Lynetta, and I appreciate the explanation. It's really helpful for me. One question I had for you, and this is kind of nitty-gritty on language, and then I'll go to you, Charlie, is when you were talking about the SPL and that there could be a gap in when a drug is available for purchase and it's approved for sale. Were you recommending that the language first available for purchase be changed to first approved for sale?
It depends on what you're looking for,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you got two different things going on here. Because the FDA is not clear in what that approval date actually means. It does say on the FDA's website that its product is commercially available. However, a manufacturer may not be able to sell the product on its approval date. So that's
Right.
where it's very difficult when what you see the manufacturers do, they'll list it on their SPL with their approval date, they'll feed it to Daily Med, but what'll happen in the pricing compendiums, you'll still see that marketing start date with the earlier date, but they'll put a WAC effective date. That WAC effective date more reflects when the product is actually commercially available for sale or where it's most available. So it depends on what you're trying to look at here.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the reasons that we wanted to put in this date of introduction is because my understanding is that when the directory lists a start marketing date, that's the earliest that the product could be marketed. And but then we found in so many cases that companies were not actually putting some drugs, especially if they're specialized or they maybe need some preparation, that type of thing. They weren't putting it on the market sometimes 6 or 9 months later. And we would not expect a company to be able to fill out a new drug report until that drug is, within 30 days of it actually, and going on the market, because we wouldn't expect them to have that information. And so that's why I would be perfectly happy with this language of the date of introduction with the FDA start marketing date. For those products that are just boom immediately out there, they're generics or something, or the date the product is first available for purchase in the United States. I would be comfortable with those because sometimes there's that later date, and that's when the company would be able to give us the information on the new drug report.
Yeah, and that I think would be reasonable, because there are a lot of barriers that the manufacturers, particularly if it is a product that is difficult to bring to market, there's a lot of times that they are delayed because of different components or different reasons. And it could be a multitude of things, but it's very difficult for them to know exactly that date. So a lot of times they'll put that approval out there, and then they work to trying to get to when they're actually going to have their first sale. It's a struggle on the CMS side as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Lynetta.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I guess I was just struck by the previous conversation about to the extent that there are people in Oregon taking a drug and potentially payers in Oregon paying for a drug. I would think that that drug should be subject to price reporting. And it sounds like, get at least to the extent that the manufacturer is not filing with the Board of Pharmacy, then they wouldn't. So it sounds to me like maybe that calls for an update to the rules that would capture those drugs, so that we're actually getting the information that we want to get about what I'm imagining are probably pretty high priced drugs that are important to folks in Oregon. So I know that's a little bit out of the conversation of what we were having, but it made me think that maybe it calls for another update to make sure that we are capturing those drugs.
Thanks, Charlie. Well, we are going to reporting manufacturer definition next. Go ahead, Robert.
Can I comment on what Charlie
sure.
said real quick? Just to let you know, Charlie, is one of the nice things about the drug price transparency program is that we get reporting from insurers. And so a lot of our insurer reporting will have products like that because we have authority over them. It's a challenge sometimes to have regulatory authority over somebody who's not in any way regulated by your state. That's why the Board of Pharmacy is going to probably remain as one of the conditions to be able to reporting for manufacturer to report to DPT is because of regulatory authority. And so because an Oregonian goes somewhere else and does something else that's regulated by another state, doesn't necessarily mean that DPT can require reporting from the manufacturer, but we do have reporting from insurers. We have our all payer, all claim data that has reporting requirements for insurance and other things. So there are other ways for us to find out about these drugs that are being paid by Oregon dollars or through Oregon plans and companies. So I just kind of wanted to reassure you a little bit that there are other mechanisms where we can have information about some of these other drugs that even if the manufacturer isn't necessarily subject to our DPT reporting requirements.
Thanks, Sophie. Go ahead, Robert, and then we'll go to Daria.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question on this FDA date. When does a drug become available in the market? As an industry, does the pharmaceutical industry announce a commercial launch date for a product as opposed to when it's first approved by the FDA? I thought, I don't know if it's uniform, but I thought I understood that some pharmaceutical companies announce when the product is now available. Usually through some sort of web announcement or something, commercial announcement.
Go ahead, Lynetta.
Not likely. They may announce their approval, but the date that they actually make it a first available for sale, I'm not aware of it being an announcement to a public announcement. Now, for their customers, depending on the distribution model, they may announce it to specialty pharmacies or specialty distribution. It depends on the type of product that it is, but there's not typically a public announcement for a first sale date, but an approval date. Yes, that is something that a lot of manufacturers do, but it's not consistent.
Right. Okay.
Thanks, Lynetta.
Sure.
Daria, do you have any comment on that? And it seemed like you probably had another comment too.
Yeah, no, I not on that, but on the previous one, just concurring with Lynetta, and the language that you've proposed in the highlighted made available for purchase is consistent with the language in California and Washington, the way that it's phrased for the transparency programs for there. So we support consistency across the states. So it might be, I mean, it's still going to be confusing for some people, but at least then it's consistent across transparency programs. So.
Yeah,
great points.
Yeah. Brett, go ahead. I think you were next.
Hi, thanks. I just wanted my comments actually before we move on from 0520. So not on this section, but I don't know if we're at that point.
For moving on, I think that's fine actually to move on to the next section of.
Okay, well, actually, it's still in this section. It's just not on this part.
Yeah, that's fine.
One of the things that we raised in the earlier RAC is in 05202, and it's the use of the or putting into the rule the specific final call letter from 2024. And it's referring, I don't know if that's in a separate portion of this discussion or not, but we want to make sure that that is not locked in the rule for drugs that are approved in after January 1, 2025, as we go down the line, because drugs in 2026, 2027, under this rule are still going to be tied to the final call letter from 2024.
Yeah, and so we did receive, we had that conversation at the last meeting and received a couple of comments about that. And because of our constitution and delegation of authority issues, we're not allowed to have kind of it would make our jobs easier if we could have a kind of, blanket reference to like whatever the call letter is at the time. But we're not able to do that. So we have to have a specific, like a specific letter that we are referencing. And when was the other one, the 2018 letter? So, it took us some time to update that. So understand your concern and other people's concern. And there's not another way we can reference it.
So does that mean each January that a new one comes out, we have to go through this entire process?
If we
update
want
that?
to update to it, we may choose, we may choose again, and they don't always change it. It was only changed once since our initial 670.
Yeah, no, yeah, certainly get that. It's just, or whenever there's a new change or a new update to it.
We would have to do a rule change,
Okay.
Yeah.
but it might be more minor. We might be able to do a
Yeah.
quicker rule change with one RAC meeting.
Yep. Yeah. Certainly understand the concern there.
Yeah. Okay.
We're
Yeah.
just
Thank
doing
you.
our 5-year cleanup here, so.
Right. Right.
Thanks.
Sorry, I muted myself before talking. Other comments on 0520 before we move on? Okay. Let's go ahead and go to the next, which is about the clarifying the reporting manufacturer definition. So again, you can see and underline the most of the new portions. And we do have some changes here. You can go to the next slide, Karen. We had some member comments around, that the terminology was maybe too broad and a bit confusing. And we do have a proposed revision to that that we can look at next. And then there was also a comment around clarity on the application to virtual manufacturers, and we really wanted to discuss that more. So first, let's go to the next slide and talk about the proposed revision. So this was really simplifying it. You can see our proposed change on the right-hand side. It's just moving around some terminology and taking out the, not limited to. So I'll just pause and let people look at that for a second and see if this alleviates the concerns, if it adds more confusion. Thumbs up from Daria. Great. Other comments on this?
Agreed.
Okay. Great. Okay, not hearing anything else right now, and certainly not the last time you can say something. Let's go back to slide 10 for a moment and talk about the application to virtual manufacturers. We really need to hear more about this. We're not intending to newly exclude virtual manufacturers, but we need a little bit more definition on what this group is and what the concerns were.
And let me speak real quick before
Yeah.
we hear from them that our intention is to make sure that when you have a bunch of people working together to get to on a product, you have like three different companies or whatever. Maybe somebody's actually manufacturing it and somebody else is putting it in their bottles with their label or whatever they're doing. Because I don't know, there's a lot of crazy relationships out there. Is that the company that is deciding the price and selling the product is the company that needs to be registered and reporting with us, because they're the ones who have all this information that is on the new drug report. Even if maybe they don't have some of the information because they need to go and get it from the other company, they should have the contractual relationship there to go and get that information. So we expect them to have all of that information. So that's what we're trying to achieve.
Thanks, Sophie. Do folks have comments or other information about how our revisions apply or are unclear towards virtual manufacturers?
A virtual manufacturer doesn't manufacture, right? They never take possession of the product. One of the criteria is, if I'm reading this correctly, and I may not be, so that's why I'm asking you, kind of thinking about it, is they do not engage in the manufacture of prescription drugs. So, but I'm assuming that the intent here is that you're still looking for them, because a virtual manufacturer also may not register with the Board of Pharmacy. So if they don't register with the Board of Pharmacy, then they don't meet the definition of a reporting entity. And they also don't manufacture. They really are, if you will, the arms and legs of it could either be a contract manufacturer that they're working with, another entity that manufactures on their behalf, but they may not meet all of your criteria because they may actually work with a third-party logistics provider, and they may not actually hold any type of distribution licenses. The third-party logistic provider does, and they really are, if you will, kind of like the sales and marketing arms of these companies. But I'm assuming, and that's why I'm asking these questions, I'm assuming though you still want reporting, but you're not intentionally trying to exclude them.
I'm really surprised that they would not be required to register with the Oregon Board of Pharmacy. I would need to see some information about why they would not have to, because if you have somebody doing an action on your behalf, just distancing yourself from it does not absolve you from any from the requirements. And so that just seems like it's like, okay, how can I do something without having any of the consequences? And so, it's like, oh, let's just break ourselves up into 3 different companies and operate separately. And then we can just pretend like none of us have any responsibility to doing anything. And we can just, be in the dark here somewhere.
So Lynetta, my question was kind of if there's a virtual manufacturer involved in this scenario, would nobody, like no company and otherwise involved, be subject to our reporting requirements as far as you understand how they function?
And that's how that's why I'm trying to ask this question, because there are manufacturers out there, virtual manufacturers, there's lots of them, that they don't take possession of a product. And so therefore they don't ship the product. They don't ever touch it. So because of that, they use third-party logistics providers to do this on their behalf, because they really are the team that are, working with the end customers and doing all of the things that have to be done, but they don't ever take possession of the product. So since they don't, they use the third-party logistics providers' licenses with the state to distribute it. It's referred to as what is called title model, and it happens. It's out there. It does happen, and it is state specific on some of the requirements. But if the virtual manufacturer is not licensed in the state, they don't meet the requirement, right?
So you're saying that they might have their proxy registered with the Board of Pharmacy, but not that company themselves. So maybe we need to expand our definition to make sure we're not excluding those, because we certainly expect them to be reporting to us.
So I'm just asking for clarity if that's intentions. Yes.
I really appreciate that. And can you say the name of the model again?
It's called title model.
Oh, okay. Okay. Does anybody else want to say anything about virtual manufacturers? This is really helpful and exactly the kind of comment that we want to have. Whatever we're doing, we want to be intentional about it. Okay. Thanks, Lynetta.
Sure.
Okay, let's go ahead and move, let's see, to slide 12, please, on dosage. And I realize that we're spending quite a bit more time on reviewing our previous work. So hopefully these next two won't take too long, or maybe they will. We'll see. Okay, so around dosage, if you could go to the next slide. We had a comment around adding in the highest language could overestimate costs for some drugs. And the reason why we're, not necessarily concerned about this is that really what the definition of dosage is doing in the rules is setting up it's helping to define the threshold for reporting. And it's not necessarily, being reported itself. So what we're really wanting to do is have a consistent standard for determining the reporting threshold. And in the existing language around course of treatment, which is also used in the definition around reporting thresholds, similar language is already in there. If there's more than one dosage, recommended dosage, take the highest. And this doesn't include off-label uses. So just wanting to understand a little bit more about the concern around this use of highest.
I'll go. Yeah, I think your change is consistent with existing language. So I don't think it's a substantive change. Our comment was just generally around the approach in general that defining drugs by their highest potential dosage overestimates the costs of drugs. And these are, even though this is just for reporting, these reports are then provided to the drug price or to the PDAB. So they do have later implications, and they're not always relevant to an average patient. They're often biasing towards the highest or towards an outlier. So you're therefore intentionally reporting outliers to the next program down. That being said, it was more of a comment about the approach. And we're not saying that your language isn't it is a clarification, I think, of existing language.
Okay. Thanks, Daria. Do you, with the goal for having a consistent standard, is there something else that you think would be preferable?
I would be happy to go back and talk to our team about that. I don't, there are probably other approaches that could be taken that would be more of an average patient approach, but I wouldn't want to suggest anything on the fly.
Yeah, I understand that. Thank you. Yeah, Charlie, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, given kind of the imperative that we want to have as large a net as possible, I would say the highest language is something we would support. Again, just to make sure that, as you said, this is the reporting threshold, and so capturing as much as possible to begin with, I think, is important. So just wanted to state our support for keeping it as is.
Thanks, Charlie. Thanks for sharing that. Lynetta, go ahead.
I'm okay with the highest as well, but it does sometimes, like if you have a product family, and I'm going to give strange things here, so bear with me. I've got a product family of aspirin, and my higher doses of aspirin, my recommended, dose is 400 milligrams a day, and I've got a 5, a 10, and a 20, and they're all price comparative. Because of that dosage, your smaller strengths may break a threshold where your largers won't. So across a product family, it does cause disparity because, if you had to have 5 milligrams a day for 400, the price is going to be, it's going to look very different than, say, 100 milligram in a 400 dose. So I think that's where some things come in that are a little, it doesn't give you a really truly, it doesn't give you a true picture.
That's interesting.
Because, and it's that way with a lot of products that are titrated by weight. It could be titrated for other reasons as well. But that's one of the things that I'm seeing as because I work with a lot of products and I see a lot of different things, and I see that. And so a lot of times we'll wind up reporting on products, but other SKUs don't, it doesn't, it's not consistent. There's no consistency there because of this highest, but that language is not exclusive to Oregon, right? We see it
Yeah.
across.
Yeah.
We see it across. But I don't know that it's actually getting you what you're looking for.
We, again, totally understanding not wanting to make suggestions on the fly. But in written comments, we would really welcome, anyone's and everyone's suggestions about what you do think an alternative consistent standard would be.
Yeah, and I'll just say that we expect the highest recommended dosage mostly because this is tied to that specialty category of drugs. And you have to use something to determine whether your drug is in a specialty category or not for Medicare Part D. So you had to use something to make that determination, because you can't just say, I'm using a lower dose, so therefore I'm not subject to the Medicare specialty rules, and we can just put this drug over here or something like that. So a determination has to be made on that level. So I really would expect us that we will keep this the way it is currently worded. We may, as we look at making changes to IREG to match some of our rule changes, look at a way for a manufacturer to add some more, to put in that dosage that's being used for the calculation to determine whether they had to report or not, but then also give them an extra text box that, something like the PDAB or somebody would also can take into consideration on whether whether that drug is really an issue or not, when you look at maybe if the average dosage is the highest recommended one.
Let's keep moving along, just looking at time. And Lynetta, did you want to say something?
No, that's fine.
Okay. You can go to slide 14. This is really about good faith effort. And we proposed removing this. And there were at least 2 different comment letters asking us to retain that, and sharing that it's used in statute without a definition, and that removal could really cause problems, creating reluctance or difficulty for compliance, and giving kind of more unlimited discretion to assess penalties. So just wanted to bring this up again, and you can see that we didn't make any changes to the rules yet in terms of what we proposed already, but see if there's any other comment that people wanted to make on this as we continue to do our internal review.
Hey, yeah, this is something that is really important to our members here, that not doing this change. I think that language is important for compliance for members, and it is sort of a legal standard used in lots of different code sections and in lots of different regs. So it seems to be understood well enough to be used in other places. So unless there's a problem that this hasn't been understood, that there's been, the other clarifications are all around, questions from manufacturers when they're asking about their submissions. Unless there's a problem with this language, we would really like to see it retained. Thank you.
Thanks, Daria. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, thanks. It's also some of the inconsistencies that are in it as we read it. So if you look in 05251, include all the information required to report without the good faith. Then you go down to 4, then potentially being hammered for not limiting the amount of information that is given. And then you jump over to the next section, 0530Q, and it's asking for any information that the manufacturer deems relevant. So you've kind of got 3 different criteria in there. 1, report, everything we ask for. 2, limit what you report. And 3, report what you deem relevant. So
I see what you're
I
saying,
just
Brett. Yeah.
I just want to point out that somewhat of the inconsistencies and without that good faith, that's kind of the bucket protection of, well,
Mhm.
which one is it?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, we
Appreciate
have
that comment.
we get responses from, very short sentence that doesn't have quite enough information to, oh, here's our book.
Yeah.
Oh,
No,
thanks.
I mean, I fully understand where you're trying to go, but it's
Yeah.
each manufacturer that is reporting, whichever one it is, they're going to throw their hands up and
Right. Yeah.
not
No,
know.
I appreciate you pointing that out. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. I don't mean to be rushing this and certainly welcome other comments, but want to make sure we get at least a little time to talk about new material, if that's all right with everybody, to move on. Okay, let's go to slide 16. So again, I'll try to go over our questions quickly, and clearly I should have done 2 hours for this meeting instead of trying to squeeze it in an hour and a half. But so, I mean, you saw some of the changes. We're just breaking out different pieces to try to just have that be more clear. But around the prescription drug reporting for new drugs, we want to make sure that one, the new language is clarifying, and also really ask around in 1C the appropriate timing for capturing market costs both prior to launch and post launch. So I just, would really love, and if you're not prepared to answer these now, would really love written comments on this too. Daria, go ahead.
Yeah, the 1C is particularly something that I wanted to bring up. And I
Great.
think what we would say is not around timing, but around being more clear on what you mean by marketing. There are lots of different activities that can be considered marketing depending on your definition. There are prohibitions on some types of marketing that are not allowed to happen before FDA approval. And then there are other things that may be happening. So we just really would ask you to be very clear on what business activities you intend when you're doing that.
That's really helpful. And it'd be great if in your comments you could give a couple specifics too, just so we're kind of clear on what you're thinking about too. But can certainly look more into that.
Yeah, that would be great if it would be helpful to define certain things like that haven't been previously defined, that we would welcome assistance in clarifying that. Because I have had people ask, like, is a salesperson marketing? Like, probably, but it's hard to know, what we should include for consistency and for public information and benefit to the public on what kind of expenses there are.
Yeah. Other comments around either the timing for capturing marketing costs or what Daria brought up around the definition of marketing.
I would have to echo her sentiments there. It's really
Mhm.
difficult on knowing what to tell a manufacturer, what is included in a marketing cost. Several. But also the time period, prior to and post. And I mean, a lot of companies say that they don't really have any marketing costs prior to approval because they can't. They can't have anything. They can't actually do anything. So I'm asking, kind of struggling with my words here, so I apologize. But I'm trying to understand what it, because I get this question a lot from our manufacturers. What are you actually looking for? What is the purpose of this? What is the purpose of the marketing cost?
Yeah,
Disclosure.
and of course, marketing is one of the biggest contentions when you look at the whole reason our program was created. Companies are spending billions and billions of dollars marketing drug products, and there are ads bombarded daily. And so there's a lot of concern about, is this why my drugs are so high? Is this why my drugs cost a ridiculous amount to both the system or myself personally? So that's that marketing is a huge deal. And so that's definitely the why. And one of our things is that we want to start capturing this amount, and we're going to update IRAC to have a quantity in there of both the direct-to-consumer marketing and for the healthcare, any other healthcare industry marketing that's out there. And one of the things we really want to be consistent is comparing apples to apples, is to ask for a certain time frame. And so that's why we really would like your all's help on what makes sense to how much time, when you put a new drug on the market, how much planning is there on the marketing expense where it would make sense to maybe go out 6 months or go out, what could be consistently gathered from a company that of how much planned expenses they'd have. And then also any of those pre-expenses, even if it's, paying the marketing company to design an ad, because you haven't done the ad yet because you're not allowed to, but you paid somebody to design ads for you. You've maybe even done some filming, you've done some other things, and stuff like that before the launch. So we want to capture that too. And so it'd be really helpful to hear from you all about what would make the most, what is something you could consistently provide in a time span, both before and after that drug goes on the market, so that we can have comparable things across drugs and have, oh, this company spent this much during that time span. This company spent this much, and then it's an actual fair comparison because everyone's looking at the same time period.
Thank you. That's very helpful because it's hard to explain this to particularly manufacturers that are just launching new products
Yeah,
the
yeah,
first time.
I can see that, Lynetta. So especially appreciate, like Sophie said, kind of comments around, written comments around things that you think would be improvements in terms of, defining things so we can have consistency for reporting manufacturers. I'm gonna skip to the next slide about 0535 and really wanting, so you saw the changes there, which was really kind of eliminating needing approval for an extension notice, and wanted to make sure that was clear. So we struck that last section. So manufacturers who need additional time for additional information still need to submit a notice, but that's just automatically approved now. But wanted to make sure that was clear for folks.
Was not clear. Appreciate that clarification.
So it's not clear in the rule now, the draft rule?
No, we weren't exactly sure what you were getting at and why that was being stricken. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that the true for other folks too? Really just trying to eliminate, because I think DPT had approved every request, so it just seemed like an unnecessary kind of administrative burden and delay.
Yeah, the attempt here is to kind of be like, I guess to, for my former life as a tax auditor, is to be kind of like that, where you've submitted the 6-month extension request, and just submitting it is good enough. It's automatically granted. So we're trying to go that route.
So we can work on language, or feel free to suggest things that you think would make it more clear.
While we're on
In
that
writing, you don't have to yet.
While we're on that section, can you
Yeah.
describe the reason for the change of one or more written requests for supporting documentation?
We have follow-up sometimes because there's things that aren't clear, like someone has submitted something, or maybe they've submitted part of the answer, and then they didn't submit the rest of it, and that type of thing. So we just wanted to clarify that there can be more than one back and forth sometimes.
So I know we haven't left very much time for you all to ask questions of these revised sections. the newly revised sections. I was hoping that they would be, this section was kind of minimally revised, so there would not be as much time needed. But I want to just open it up for a couple minutes before we go to public comment. If there were outstanding issues on the newly revised sections that haven't been discussed yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Daria.
And we will be submitting a letter, and we do need
Yes.
to like spend some more time reviewing it, but high level, we do have concerns that some of the language that you're adding in is a new expansion of the program that goes beyond statute, and some of the data elements are proprietary and confidential, and companies may have concerns with those, but we will put that in writing for you.
Great. Thank you for the heads up. Other things that folks want to share broadly or specific about this new section of revised rules? Okay. I will be a broken record and say we really welcome your written comments. And now let's open it up for public comment. And Karen, has anybody put themselves in line for public comment? Seeing any?
I don't see anything in the chat for public comment.
If you are a member of the public and would like to make a comment, now is your opportunity. Feel free to raise your hand or come off mute. Okay, I'm not hearing anything or seeing anything in the chat. So since we still have about 12 minutes left, I know that last section at least felt a little bit rushed to me. Were there other kind of points or questions that we brought up on the new material that folks would like to comment on or discuss or try to, it sounds like Daria, we answered some of your questions, not understanding why we had stricken the approval part for the additional information. Other things that we did that were potentially confusing or you don't understand why, that would be more helpful to have in conversation before you do written comments. Okay. Not hearing anything. If you can go to the last slide, Karen, so we can just see the next steps and the proposed timing. So we would love written comments by the close of business on October 3rd. So that gives you, I think, hopefully 2 weeks at least to, 2 weeks exactly, to do more review and get your thoughts in writing. You do see our next meeting scheduled on the 17th. Given how this went today and knowing that we'll have, even more, I'm probably going to extend it to a full 2 hours, even though I feel bad about doing that to everybody. But please, if you have a conflict, please let me know, I would say by the end of tomorrow, if you can, just so we can get this on people's calendars and make sure all RAC members can attend. And we'll discuss at the next meeting, everything will be open to discussion, but we will be sharing kind of the next third of the revised rules, as well as going over written comments that we've received. Yeah, go ahead, Daria.
Is the third tranche the last one?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other kind of questions or comments? I'd be willing to give you a 5-minute break if we do 2 hours too, if we need to. All right. Really appreciate everybody coming and giving such thoughtful feedback and introducing us to new potential areas that we weren't aware of. That's what these are all about, and we really appreciate it. And we'll look forward to written comments, and don't hesitate to reach out in the meantime. You can send any comments to me and Karen. You're welcome to copy Sophie too. Thanks everyone, or not. Don't flood her inbox.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
We'd appreciate those comments with the help with this. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Take
you.
care, everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.